open up. We're going to try and have 2 rounds of discussion, some reflections on what we've heard, and then a little bit from what's happening in each country, and then we'll open up to the panel. So, okay, so I'll come and join you here. Maybe I could start with Rósa. So, we 2, yeah, you're good, relax, we can chat. We heard a lot there in 2 presentations. Will you give us some reflections on what you take out of it?
Yes, thank you, Gary. Well, I like Marianne's work a lot and her suggestions for governments and public policy and her call, as you can say, for governments to be a creative force for this collective progress and be aware of their role in actively shaping solutions, shaping market. And it's not only there, the state or governments to fix failures of the market. And I think that we in the Nordic countries have several examples of collective policies that aim for the public good. One example close to my heart and my profession is the policy field of gender equality that resonates with the experience of other Nordic countries. We have not only imagined more space for women to take on leadership role, both in politics and the labor market. I mean, this is the result of a very incremental process that had the bottom-up approach and in partnership with a very strong women's movement and a very strong labor movement as well. And the policies that we have worked on during the latest decades are many: liberal abortion rights, standalone time for fathers to take on parental leave, just to name a few, gender quotas on corporate boards, etc., etc. And this is not something that falls from heaven, as to say. It's very mission-oriented, and it has so many cross-sectoral positive aspects. And to take us out of the tunnel, I would also like to say that you know, to imagine some light at the end of the tunnel, all the things that we have been working on in the field of well-being economy, the SDGs, etc. And I'm now involved in a task on shaping an industrial policy for Iceland. And we would never imagine to shape that policy without recognizing the importance of climate action, of the SDGs, of equity, of health for all. So I think, yes, to reflect on Marianne's. And then, of course, I have followed the work on the Finnish proposal, and I think it's very bold and very thorough worked on. There are some elements that are aligned with the Icelandic experience, which in a way was generated by a just do it approach. So we do have the set of indicators since 2019 for the well-being economy. And we have already integrated well-being priorities to our budget process. And of course, there have been pros and cons with this approach. But of course, we have learned a lot. And I think, for example, the suggestion in the proposal to anchor this with an ombudsman for future generation is very good, because we have the positive example from Wales that is very cross-sectoral and has many good effects in different areas. Wales now championing, for example, in the circular economy. So, yes, I think this was my 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I think
probably.
you did well. That was great. And I always think of Iceland really, you're right in the sense of gender equality. You were a way ahead and out there doing a mission approach because it took that whole system kind of join up. Lloyd is going to, he'll get a chance to speak about the Future Generations Act, which we've heard loads of it already. But before that, give us some reflections on what you've heard so far.
Yeah, so I echo that it was an amazing presentation and great to see the work being done. I think 2 reflections, and one actually comes off something you just said about the ombudsman. What was really striking, especially that slide which had the strategic governance, resource governance, and knowledge-based governance, was that there isn't one right way to do this. Yeah. There's lots of different ways shown across the Wellbeing Economy Governance Network, but also across other parts of the world. And it's taking the good bits from each one. So if that's from Wales, taking the commissioner to hold government to account and keep the momentum going, and I will go on to him a bit later in the work that he's doing, then great. But also, the work that's happening in Scotland, Gary, that's happening in New Zealand and elsewhere in Iceland as well. And I think taking all those bits and trying to find what's the best way in your specific country or your specific local area or wider is really important. I think that slide just really stuck out to me in doing that and taking those different areas. The second bit was the difference between the short-term and medium-term goals. In Wales, one of our ways of working is to think long-term. So there's a duty on Welsh Government and public bodies to think long-term. And wellbeing objectives and goals are set on that principle of thinking long-term. But last week I was in a session with representatives and CEOs from various public bodies in Wales where we were thinking why we're not quite achieving those long-term goals that we want. And we thought about it in time horizons. So we were thinking, what do you think about in minutes, hours, days, months, years, decades, centuries, millenniums? And what we found was that our discourse and what we're writing down in these objectives are quite often in years and decades. By 2050, we want to recover nature or have an economy which is everyone is earning a real living wage, those kind of goals. But in our day-to-day working practices, we're thinking days, months, at most a year, and there are reasons why that's happening in our system. So budgets are always one. We've mentioned a lot today about election cycles and how sometimes they can get in the way of delivering these goals. And in Wales, we've got an election next year, and already the kind of political discourse is starting to happen, and that can overcome various kind of ambitions and objectives towards getting to goals. So I really like seeing the slide of separating it out and being honest that some goals are going to be short term, but then you can build them into medium and longer term goals.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful. And there's so much again in both, but we've gone from gender equality to kind of Wales, and we're coming to happiness. Veli-Mikko, you're officially the happiest country in the world, so what do you think?
Of course, I'm very happy on that. But I will skip on commenting the Finnish presentation. I will do it back at home. But maybe another element is that why in the global health policy discussion, this theme on economy of well-being or well-being economy is taking that much stock. And in fact, I have to tell you that when we started to join the movement some 10, 15 years ago, we were a bit jealous to countries like Iceland, where the Prime Minister's office was the strong, or in New Zealand, where the Ministry of Finance was the strongest power to work on this area. And in Finland, it was first NGOs at social and health questions, and then later on our Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. And we thought that we are quite weak because we don't have the whole state budget, or we don't have the Prime Minister's power behind us. And but it fit very well for us, and maybe mostly for that reason that in Finland we have strong expertise in thinking about health in all policies, which we brought also to the WHO agenda some 20 years ago. And there are, of course, many similarities that health is not created only by health professionals or even at all. It's a question for the whole of society, so we need all ministries in the government to work for the same goals. And then if we, through economy of well-being, we could also add the economic element that is, of course, great also for the whole of government aspect. And then, of course, there came the COVID pandemic, which clearly showed every nation and globally how ill health, the difficulties in health and what it had as a consequences in the society, both social and health consequences, how dramatically it affected also economy. So I think after that, it is so obvious for everyone to say that if you don't keep your well-being policies, including health and social welfare, in good shape, that is bad for your economy. So it's just a practical approach.
Yeah, and I think the work that you did in the economy of well-being, bringing that into the EU, was really important. You get a flavour here from the countries that, in a sense, is where the work originates within different countries is different. So Veli-Mikko from the Social Affairs and Health Department, Lloyd from the Future Generations Sustainable Development, Rósa from the Prime Minister's and Finance Office. In Scotland, it's more the works kind of came out of our economic strategy approach, trying to change the approach. So it's been touched on already. You get different perspectives and there's different ways in. And I think one of the advantages of the wellbeing economy governments is that Veli-Mikko can say, well, in Scotland, the economy people are saying this. I can say to our health colleagues in Finland, health are driving this. We're all looking at future generations model, and we're all looking at budgeting. But let me come to Jinane. Great to have you on the session, and you should have sat here actually. I don't know why you sat there, but so what's your reflections on what we've heard?
Yeah, so it was, I was happy to hear in the Finnish proposal that they mentioned the inclusiveness and the importance of having communities being part of the governance. It's important to have governance where communities are part, they are embedded into these governance structures. This will help build trust in government to ideally achieve well-being for the whole society. This makes the communities and the citizens actors and partners with the governments. Here I'd like to give an example that is a bit different. It's related to health and to the COVID vaccination in Brussels. Brussels is a city that is very diverse. There is very large and diverse migration background there. So during the COVID pandemic, the vaccination strategy started by being centralized, a one size fit for all. And then we realized that the vaccination strategy in Brussels was suboptimal. We didn't reach the vaccination rates that were in other regions. So the government shifted from a centralized approach to a decentralized approach that was more tailored towards the communities and that included the communities and made them actors of their own vaccination strategy. And this is where vaccination rates improved, but they still didn't improve in the way that the government wanted. And after digging deeper, one of the issues that came up were actually trust in government. And that's why it's very important to have communities as included in this governance to build this trust and move towards a society of well-being as a whole.
Yeah, no, and Janine's doing a PhD looking at that research, so we'll look forward to seeing your outcomes. But there's something about just different levels of government, and it can't be kind of top down all the time, especially in areas in health. So I think in terms of my own reflections on the contribution so far, so I've had the pleasure to work with Mariana for 10 years or more, and she is a regular in Scotland. She's advising us on our green industrial strategy, taking a mission-based approach to that, helping us think about how we use our procurement levers to maximise community benefit value. So she was also involved in us setting up a Scottish National Development Bank. She did some work for us in that front. And I first got involved with her because I run a group called the Council of Economic Advisors, and she was one of the advisors that we had on, along with Professor Stiglitz, that helped launch WEGo back in 2018. So Mariana's work's really interesting and worth having a look at for all the reasons people have said about shaping markets and thinking about the important role of government and capacity and how you use contracts, conditionality, how you drive change. I think in the second presentation, I suppose Scotland, we were in the category of kind of knowledge-based governance, and I think that's probably fair enough. We do a lot of kind of evidence-based policies. We've got loads of different policies, but we also have, I would say, strategic and resource governance. And I'll maybe say a little bit more about that when we get onto that kind of subject. So I think we've got a number of kind of national policies, but we've got a number of kind of sub-national policies, and actually the role of government is only one part of a kind of massive system. But this is the government panel, so you'll get your chance to ask the government why we don't do more, perhaps, why we don't go quicker. But anyway, that's probably enough for me. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have I'm going to ask each speaker to share or highlight one particular feature of the work on wellbeing economy within their country. And then we will open up for a kind of broader discussion. And so have a think about anything you've heard, any questions, comments, and we'll come to the panel with that. So will I just come back to you, Rósa, to start?
Yeah, I could start by repeating that has already been said, that I mean, a lot of this resonates by the political leadership of those female prime minister that initiated the WEGo cooperation, and in terms of Iceland, the political leadership of Katrín Jakobsdóttir kind of started this journey. But as we know, political leadership isn't enough. We need to embed it in the policy-making work, and in Iceland, we, as I said earlier, we had this approach of starting with designing the set of 40 well-being indicators that has helped us, or been helpful, not only in budgetary work, but also during the pandemic. It did help us to analyze how the pandemic was affecting different societal groups in a different way. We have an indicator measuring mental health, where we could, both during the pandemic but also after the pandemic, make some targeted policy solutions. So I guess that from envisioning, a different economic system at the beginning of those political leaders, we have succeeded in many different ways, not only in the budgetary process. But it's also important to notice where we come from, because in a way our journey began by the 2008 financial crisis, which indeed deeply shocked public confidence and highlighted the limits of this GDP, emphasizing traditional economy. And in the aftermath, both in politics but also in the public, we began to ask different questions. not only about growth, but about whether we were truly creating the right conditions for people to thrive, and our communities as well. And I think we shouldn't forget that, and in which situation we were. And since then, of course, many crises have occurred, and now we are stuck in this geopolitical crisis with a lot of uncertainty. But crises do open the door for a broader view of progress. And with this in mind, and influence from this broad public discourse, many policy work was initiated, and we had a new Public Finance Act in 2015, allowing us for more, opening the door for performance-based budgeting, and allowing us for then newly the SDGs and, for example, the well-being priorities to be better and directly cooperated and embedded into the budgetary process. And I mean, these priorities that both come from the SDGs and the well-being priorities, they are not symbolic. It's something that each and every ministry needs to reflect on and design their objectives for the next 5 years accordingly. So I mean, and we can't not forget that we are in many ways, of course, shaped by the fact that we are a Nordic welfare society. And it has been a challenge to add this perspective to the work of different ministries, because welfare, well-being, aren't we doing this already? But it has, in a way, added a dimension that is also connected to our to international politics and to a broader imagination of working for the planet, the people. And it has given us tool also to reflect on our big ecological footprint, for example. And that has the policy work on sustainability also done. So I think it gives us a much broader view on problems and solutions that we had earlier.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always think of the wellbeing economy as a kind of operating framework for governments that allows you to kind of look across the piece. But I get the sense of your challenge when you're maybe different.
And then maybe I can add that there has also been a policy work, very policy work within individual ministries. For example, the Ministry of Education and Children, the Icelandic Prosperity Act. And there again, you see that we use different terms in this work. We talk about prosperity, sustainability, well-being, etc. And this act that was submitted and approved by Parliament, I think some 4 or 5 years ago, defines prosperity as the condition society must provide for each child, physical, mental, intellectual, and social development. And what makes this legislation notable is that it was developed alongside the full economic analysis, attempting to evaluate well-being in monetary terms. And the findings of this were very compelling and supported the discourse and the political will to to the process of, or the parliamentary process, because despite the high implementation cost on ensuring the cross-sectoral cooperation between schools, health institutions, etc., to provide for every child's prosperity, the Act is expected to generate long-term economic gain. And in fact, these calculations resulted in the fact that investing in this Prosperity Act and building up this cross-sectoral cooperation exceeded the governmental investments in the international airport. Oh. So you can see that that we have been working on this, both from the Prime Minister office, the Ministry of Finance, but also in individual ministries with great success.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic example of that. And we had the benefit of a presentation from the officials in the Icelandic government around that act, getting it right for every child. And actually the work that they've done, if you want an example of kind of upstream or preventative, about kind of modelling the savings in future years, it's really, really good. So we need more of those kind of models. And that's partly what we do within this network. We can have these kind of conversations and share approaches and evidence and stuff. So there's a lot of kind of sharing goes on. And just before I come to Lloyd, I thought your comment about the financial crisis was really informative. For me, the impact of the financial crisis made us think differently about the economy and kind of there's a kind of crisis in economics, maybe similar to how the pandemic has impacted on health and health systems. So I think both of them really important and kind of shaping where we've ended with the wellbeing economy. But let me come to Lloyd now. You've been billed about 3 or 4 times for Future Generations Act, but I'm sure you'll maybe share a little bit more about it for us.
Yes, of course. Before I think I go on to the Act, I'm aware that not everyone might know what Wales is and where it is. Yeah. It's obviously part of the United Kingdom, but I think I was inspired by the conversation earlier on Adam Smith, and I think the best way to describe Wales is to do it through a person. And one of my kind of political heroes, if that's okay to go through, is a man called Aneurin Bevan. I'm not sure if many outside of the UK will know Aneurin Bevan, but he was the Minister of Health when the National Health Service in the UK came through. And it wasn't a simple ministry to just get that through. There was a lot of challenges from his own government at the time as well. But the reason I bring him up is not because he brought in the National Health Service, but it's his journey to get there. So he was a working class son of a miner in the South Wales valleys, which was a very industrialised mining community and still feels the repercussions of that industrialisation today. And at the age of 19, he was a trade unionist for the miners and was in the kind of general strike of 1926 in the UK, which was a really kind of big moment of that time. And kind of moving then on to his political career, he was elected in the South Wales Valleys in the 1920s as an MP for a place called Ebbw Vale, a centre-left MP for the Labour Party. And he was known for speaking out, as I mentioned, not only against the opposition, but against his own government. And he was one of the only MPs in Parliament who actually spoke out against the coalition government during the war, because he felt industrial workers were being mistreated, the ones who were kind of, producing the ammunitions and things. And he wanted their rights to be assured, not just during the war, but post-war. And I think the reason he highlights to me what Wales is all about is because when he then came to making the National Health Service, he actually used a local example from a place called Tredegar in South Wales, which had a medical aid society within it, which was free at the point of use. And so he took that from his local community, this free at the point of use medical society, all the way up to not just Welsh government, not just kind of wider local stuff, but to the whole of the national government. And that's what Wales to me is about. It's industrial, but it's also community, social and local focused. And that's why in 2014, so just over 10 years ago, we had a conversation on the Wales we want. So this was mentioned earlier, but it was a national conversation with kind of thousands of individuals across lots of different meetings and sessions across all of Wales to discuss what do we actually want in Wales, what can be delivered for you, the people. And from that, we got the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And it's quite a complicated architecture to the legislation. So I'm going to give kind of a brief overview of what it is, and then a little bit of how it's impacting policy in Wales. And then I'll finish with kind of looking ahead to the future, because last week we had the Future Generations Commissioner publish a report. It's called the Future Generations Report, holding to account and looking at providing recommendations to Welsh Government and public bodies. So firstly, what is it? Well, we celebrated the 10-year anniversary of it last week. And what it does is so Wales became the first Western nation to legislate for the UN Sustainability Goals. And it enshrines in law the requirement for Welsh Government and other public bodies to consider the well-being of its people, but not just people now, but for those who can't be represented yet. So that's children and also future generations who are not yet born, hence the future generations in the name of the Act. And it does this in multiple ways, but it does it through a sustainable development principle. And I'm just going to kind of quote the principles. So it's the process of improving the economic, social, environmental and cultural well-being of Wales by taking action aimed at 7 interconnected well-being goals. So it's important to mention, I know this is a well-being economy forum, but it's more than just the well-being economy. It's drawing together all those different aspects of what matters to people, the environment, our culture, and making sure we have a thriving culture, but also the social and economic aspects. And there is a slide which shows this a lot better than I can present, but the 7 goals are a prosperous Wales, a resilient Wales, an equal Wales, a healthier Wales, a Wales of cohesive communities, a Wales of a vibrant culture and a thriving Welsh language, and a globally responsible Wales. And the crucial thing about these goals is that when developing a policy or delivering an action or a project, is Welsh Government and public bodies have a duty to not just consider one of these. So if you're doing a health project or a project on Welsh language, you're not just considering a healthier Wales or a Wales with thriving Welsh language, but to consider all of them together. So when you're delivering them, consider how it can make Wales prosperous, how it can make it resilient, how does it affect equality, how does it affect our global footprint and our impact on the world wider than just Wales. And then underpinning that is the 5 ways of working. I touched on one of them earlier, long term. There's also prevention, and prevention's come up a lot today, specifically in the realm of health. So bringing not just being reactive to health inequalities, but doing policies to prevent it. And then there's integration, collaboration, and involvement. And that makes sure that we're working together at all levels. So collaborating from organisation to organisation, as we're doing today. Involving those who might not have a voice. So going to those communities that have been left behind or don't get a say in kind of political spheres, and actually hearing what they want from policies. And then integrating policy across different, kind of across silos, and Rosa mentioned that just now, where working not just in kind of the education space, but working across all the different areas there. And so how has this impacted on Welsh policy? I'll touch on 3 which are relevant to the wellbeing economy. The first is fair work. So in 2022, Welsh Government published a guide to fair work, where it kind of defined fair work as the presence of observable conditions at work, which means workers are fairly rewarded, represented, secure, and able to progress in a healthy and inclusive working environment. And ultimately, this is about promoting and pushing for kind of a working environment which is attractive and also considers the well-being of its workers. And it has lots of practical examples, but 2 I'll point to here is the real living wage, and particularly extending that not just to a wage, but to things like sick pay, pensions contributions, and making sure that workers are considered in that from the kind of organisation which is employing them. And also collective representation for decision making, be that through trade unions or representation at these kind of boards and CEO level from the workers. And since 2016, around 24,000 people in Wales were uplifted to the real living wage, which has added kind of £141 million in additional income for low-wage earners. I'll go on to where it's not been as successful in a minute, but I wanted to touch on kind of the successes first. The second example I've got is in procurement. So in 2023, Wales passed the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act. And this does lots of different things, but the bit I want to touch on is that a duty to have socially responsible procurement within it. And that's for the same bodies which are in the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, so the Welsh Government and all public bodies across Wales. And this duty requires that bodies deliver economic, environmental, social and cultural well-being through their procurement activities. And it means that for the first time in Wales, public bodies will deliver improvements through the life of a procurement project. So they have to think of things like environmental protection, resilience, the kind of end of life of that project, and not just deliver the classic definition of kind of value for money, which is kind of sometimes being considered as the cheapest or most efficient way of doing it. It's considering those wider aspects, again, bringing in more of the goals, how it can impact local communities, how it can impact the environment. And just touching on one kind of real world example of that was in Merthyr Tydfil in the South Wales Valleys, actually near to where Anara and Bevan is from. There was a bus station which was a £12 million project. And it really kind of embedded this type of procurement by being a benchmark for green transport projects. It has 100% waste diversion rate, is largely constructed for easier maintenance, and it has considered the destruction of the place at the end as well to be as sustainable as possible. And it has no gas or fossil fuel supplies and is trying to run purely on kind of renewable energy and be a pioneer in that space for green transport. Lastly, it's been touched on already, but I wanted to touch on the circular economy. I feel like this comes up every time Wales is mentioned because we're very proud of it, but Wales has achieved kind of large success in the circular economy by putting sustainable development at the heart of it. We're second in the world for high quality separate recycling. I'm not sure if anyone from Austria is in today, but they are first. Congratulations. We're aiming to get first soon, so watch this space. We were also, between 2011 and 2024, landfill use in Wales dropped from 95% to just 0.9%, so a massive drop over that kind of just over 10-year period. And this is done by embedding well-being at its heart. We have focused a lot on behaviour change, so harnessing the environmental and cultural desire within citizens. We saw earlier that people are willing to have change, as long as it's positive change, which will positively impact their life. And so rather than just putting kind of top-down governments telling you to recycle, it's bringing people into these conversations saying, how would you like to harness the circular economy? And that's been helped by conversations on plastic use and single-use plastic use as well. And this, in turn, has attracted investment. So separate recycling materials has attracted inward investment with massive kind of large-scale, UK-scale recycling facilities coming across Wales, North Wales, West Wales, South Wales, attracting hundreds of green jobs for the circular economy, and then, again, contributing to our fair work, because these are high-paid, high-skilled green jobs which are coming to Wales, reinvesting in communities, in education, and going back into kind of workers' pockets. Now, it's not all positive. I mentioned the Future Generations report. That came out last week. That is published 1 year before an election. So on the 10th anniversary of the Act, the Future Generations report, Future Generations Commissioner, alongside the Auditor General for Wales, published 2 reports which basically assessed where we are in Wales, advised with 50 recommendations to the Welsh Government and public bodies on where we can improve our well-being and the delivery of our well-being in Wales, but also looked at the positives and showcased lots of different positives that happen across Wales, like some of the ones I just mentioned then. In terms of the wellbeing economy, there were 9 specific recommendations with 7 findings within that. And I'll just touch on 2 related to the bit I mentioned earlier, if there's enough time, Gary.
Just TD.
Yeah. So on fair work, I mentioned that a lot more people are having the real living wage, but it's a key pillar of our Welsh Government fair work agenda, but still only 64% of people in Wales are earning the real living wage in 2023. And so the report recommends taking steps to increase the accreditation for employers of real living wage in both public bodies and in private sector organisations. And this is where the collaboration comes in, because I know that some of my colleagues here, so Gary specifically in Scotland, has a much higher percentage of this. So I'm keen to learn how Wales can kind of transition towards bringing that more into not just the public sector, but the private sector as well. And secondly, on the circular economy, I mentioned the successes are very much in recycling, but Wales is still using double our biocapacity. And so now we need to transition not only to recycling, but to reuse and repair. And so we've committed to 80 hubs, reuse and repair hubs across Wales, so that everyone has access in each town to one of these by 2026, with an aim that if we increase the use of reuse and repair by 25%, we could create 28,000 green jobs in the circular economy in Wales, which will in turn lead to better environmental outcomes. And so just to conclude, kind of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act is a framework to delivering this, but there's a lot of work to do on the ground and in all the different policy areas that we mentioned: health, education, nature, learning from all different kind of countries and examples to bring all those goals together and deliver kind of for the people. And that can be top down and bottom up approaches.
Thanks very much, Lloyd. So there's loads in that from the Act and applications in Wales, so thanks for sharing that. We're definitely going to come to the audience in a few minutes, so don't worry, you're going to get your questions ready, but I'll come to Veli-Mikko first.
Thank you very much, and thank you and congratulations to the Icelandic colleagues for organizing once again this fine forum and the nice discussions. I would like to introduce you some Finnish people. I don't know if we had some slides there available. Possibly. Possibly not. Then I have to describe them.
Maybe stand up and describe them. We can make it more interesting.
The first would be kind of an athletic person.
They're all very happy.
Yeah, very happy, yes.
Yeah. I don't think. Yeah.
Well, maybe they have disappeared. Yeah. But to start with the fact that, as we all know, that we are living in the world of pollution crisis, and in fact, now we are getting closer and closer, even physically, to the very existential crisis like war here in Europe. And that's, of course, very challenging, and we need that there are high pressures to increase spending on military budgets and defense. And as was mentioned by Heikki, that for us in Finland, that's of course quite concrete that we have a long border against Russia. In fact, it has been asked, is the long border a problem? And the right answer would be, no, that's not the problem. The problem would be that there would be no border at all. But we have to spend more, and then of course it's a question that what kind of resources we would have to be as strong as possible. And in Finland we have a system of obligatory military service for young men, boys, and approximately 25,000 boys are recruited yearly to military service. And they have been followed quite closely, of course, for their health. And the results during the last 30 years show that the weight of recruits has on average gone up by 8 kilos, where the height of boys has not increased nearly at all. And there has been made this so-called Cooper test. You have to run 12 minutes, and the results of Cooper test has gone down by 400 meters during the last 30 years. So it doesn't sound very good for the kind of a force they should represent. In addition, there is, of course, increasing number of mental health questions, both in boys and girls. So only 60% of young boys passes military service today at all. Some are released even before. No one wants to give them a gun at all. But that shows clearly that health is also a question of defense. In many countries, the discussion today is that should we spend more on weapons and less on something else, like social and health services and social security. The NATO General Secretary Rutte went in January to European Parliament and made a speech that can't you cut a bit from your pensions and your social services? Only little would be enough. He knew very well that pensions or social spending is not the issue for European Parliament. It's a national issue in member states. But that gives kind of a warning signal in my mind that we have to be prepared. Of course, everyone share the concerns related to security, and we want to be as prepared as possible. But the answer should not be automatically that we can cut from social services. In fact, there are strong dangers if we do that too dramatically and we put in place harsh austerity measures. The two guys I would have liked to represent, the first would be our president, who is very athletic and gives a good example to young boys, but the two others had been from history, like Lloyd had also. First, and they were active in times between First and Second World War, which is of course topical due to the fact that now is the 80th anniversary of the end of the Second World War in Europe, and you know that Finland was part of that war, and that was a good question how we managed to survive the war. So these two people I wanted to present to you were first of all a lady called Miina Sillanpää. She was the first female minister in Finland in 1926. She became the Minister of Social Affairs, and she was very active working for the gender equality questions, but also working for example, she created the system for shelters for single mothers and their babies, that they could get help and protection. But and the other person I would have introduced would be doctor called Arvo Ylppö, and Ylppö's reputation comes from that he was pediatric, and he brought up the system of childcare centers in the early 1920s, which helped very much to increase the life expectancy of children. Earlier on, there was a huge gap between the life expectancy depending on the social class of mothers, but that system managed to cut that gap quite dramatically and increase the expected life expectancy for children. Okay, why would I like to explain this is that both elements these old politicians put forward were aiming, that was not their aim, but secondarily they affected in the way that first of all we would have more capable people when the war started, and on the other side we would have more balance between female and male, which made it possible that the men went to war and the women took all the work which would have been done. And even afterward in 1940s we had the capacity for ladies to take part in the working life when we had lost so many men during the war. And simultaneously we created also strong social policy tools which helped people to be engaged in the society. So what I'm trying to tell is that I think well-being economy is very topical also during these times of very deep and strong crisis, and which are affecting our societies. And I think in the approach of whole of society, we have very strong message also from this side that we have to make strong well-being policies, because they are also part of the general policy where we keep our nation strong and we keep them safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and really interesting framing, because it's equally as relevant now as we're kind of seeing the different pressures and tensions. So we're getting tight in time, and I want to come to the audience for questions, and we'll get a hand up straight away, then I'll come to you to get a response, okay? So we've got one here, there's two here at this table, so why don't we take the two of those together, or maybe they were, yeah. Sorry, I'll come to you.
Thank you so much. Really interesting panel, and incredible that you're all kind of sitting on a stage together discussing this issue, so thank you. My name's Chelsea, I'm joining from the Australian National University in Australia, so I've travelled a long way. So I want to ask you a potentially provocative but not intended to be critical question, which is that in the wellbeing economy literature, one of the central themes of this idea is around the harms of growth, economic growth, and the idea of sufficiency, what people actually need in terms of economic capital and wealth generation to actually be well and experience well-being across their life. So my question is, how are you institutionalizing these central concepts of a well-being economy in the policies that you're responsible for beyond just narrative change? Thank you.
Yep, so I was going to give that one to you, but I'll kick it off. So I think in Scotland we have the National Performance Framework, so it's like a broader set of metrics. But I think your point more is, do we still have a growth narrative? So we would describe wellbeing economy in Scotland. In fact, we published a programme for government yesterday, 4 priorities. Growing a wellbeing economy was the first one. Eradicating child poverty, net zero transition, and investing in for public services. So I think the point, so we describe it fair, green, growing. I think the economy has a contribution. We heard earlier about the limits of GDP, accept that completely. It's not about the rate of growth, it's the direction of growth. Growth is still important in different parts of the park. So there's so much going on. I mean, we've just introduced legislation in the Scottish Parliament, Community Wealth Building. It's about reducing economic inequality across different places in Scotland. It's a law that will allow duties, a bit like the Future Generations Act, on a local level of government to enable their communities to develop derelict land for community ownership, for different types of enterprise models. We heard that being spoke about this morning. But so I think there's loads of different policies going on. I think it's also important that all of the countries here all have performance frameworks. Each government has their own priorities. And I think in the governance discussions we're hearing about moving into we're all dealing with tensions. The fiscal backdrop is difficult, and moving into budgeting and dealing with those type of issues. So sorry, your question was so big that we can't really do it all, but I want to make sure Jinane gets a chance to come in. And we've got time for maybe another couple of questions, but do you want to come in? And you never get a chance in that round, so come in and give us a flavour of what you think.
Thank you. So I just have one final thought that I would like to share, especially as part of the Youth Advisory Group. So I think that youth should have a safe space to contribute to well-being policies and to the well-being economy. We are the main workforce, we are drivers of innovation, and our needs need to be taken into account when it comes to decision-making process. And this is where I see it's very interesting and reassuring to see the Future Generations Act. It's actually also reassuring to see that there is a legal duty to include future generations in this decision-making process. And I hope that Wales, in that sense, will lead the example for other countries to do the same as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think there was some more. There's a hand there. Yeah, you got it. Yeah, just speak, I think it'll come on.
No, I think it's, oh yeah, now it was. Yes, I think it fits very well with Jinane just having spoken. I was wondering, Jinane gave a good example earlier about the advantage of community involvement and how it can make policies more effective. And I was wondering if the others of you could maybe give examples on how specifically you're engaging youth in the policy making for well-being, besides just talking about them and making strategy for them. Thank you.
Yep, I'll open that to my colleagues. There's Veli-Mikko, go first.
Well, as we spoke in our table earlier on, one type of work we have the quite long history in Finland is supporting of civil society organizations directly from the state budget. The bad side is that the money came from gambling taxes, and now we have we have to change the system in a way, but we still have this system that we are supporting these organizations quite heavily.
Lloyd, do you want to come in that?
Yeah, I think there's two ways that we're doing it in Wales. So there's kind of, I guess, more formal political structures. So we've got a youth parliament that sits in the actual parliament building. And when we were celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Act, the First Minister for Wales actually did a 10-minute session where you listen for 5 minutes to someone speak, and then you speak back for 5 minutes with the kind of leader of the youth parliament, which was a really great session to see. It was just 10 minutes of 5 minutes each of those two just speaking about the Wales they want in the future, post the Act as well. And I've also come through something which is engaging youth. So I'm an alumni of something called the Future Generations Academy in Wales, which is led by the Commissioner's Office, which brings together, in my cohort, it was something like 30, 18 to 30-year-olds from organisations across Wales. So they're sponsored organisations. That's the public, third and private sector. So I was obviously there from Welsh Government, but there was people from the steel industry, there was people from transport organisations, there was people from charities, and also just kind of PhD students and those kind of people. So that's the kind of direct way. Indirectly, it's a similar conversation with kind of engaging communities as well. So it's whether you do it at a national level or a local level. We've recently changed the curriculum to be more about kind of Welsh history, our history of colonialism as well. And although that isn't directly engaging into the conversation of the politics, it's shaping kind of critical thinking and future thinking for our children so that when they do want to engage, they can. But I know I'm running out of time, so I just wanted to kind of differentiate between the kind of organisational engagement of young people and then the kind of lateral engagement.
Yeah. And we also have several examples. For example, the Large Sustainability Council, there we have representatives from a youth association connected to the UN organization in Iceland, and they were actively involved in the national reporting towards the UN on our progress in implementing the SDGs, and did there have a very critical, both a critical voice and a critical role. But if I may, I would like to respond to the earlier question as well on the burden of growth, because I think it's a very important question, because, well, we are now here in Iceland. It's a very affluent, a rich country, and that's reflected, I mean, in our economic performance. As I said earlier, is of course based on a very strong welfare system and social policies. But to mention one example, in 2023, our GDP was grew by 5.6% because tourism began to boom again after the COVID period. And we have a very high labor participation. We ranked very high in international ranking. on happiness, quality of life, etc. But when we calculate for our ecological footprint, we drop down very quickly. And on the sustainable development list, I think we're 27th or 28th. So I think this is a very good answer to your question. And it's a way odd that those strong policies have given us such an affluent society that is harming other parts of the world. And that, of course, we need to act on. And that's why I'm a huge fan of the Wales legislation for future generation. It has, besides of having a very lovely name, it entails so much potential for moving this agenda forward. And some of the work is very boring. I mean,
very
I'm not
policy
saying that you're boring.
It's a long
but
act with lots
it's a
of
very
leaders.
long act, and and I have studied it, and in effect, it reflects our work. It's often very boring, institutionalizing great ideas and visions. But I'm not a politician, but I do love legislations to move things forward. I'm very much in favor of it, because I also think that we have very many good examples on how much progress it has brought to our societies.
We must finish on that note. So the Future Generations Act is a great policy, legislation great, though Lloyd, you could make it less boring in terms of how it actually works. But listen, we will finish this panel. Can I just say one thing? So this is the Wellbeing Economy Governments panel. We published an annual report which is available in November, and it just articulates what we discussed over the year and the different policy labs and contributions. Say a big thanks to the OECD, World Health Organization, and others who come on and help and support us within that.
Thank you so much.